again, you guys, authority is about operating in your truth, in your frequency, and how every single human, every single combination, right? We are all these combinations of different aspects and consciousness, right? Is a perfected form. We are here to become a perfected form. And really, each one of us has a role and a specific contribution to the whole. So I kind of like this quote here. Every human being that lives out their own nature brings a perfected, unique contribution to the totality. So, when we look at the charts, again, it's always about understanding that your design is perfect, right? No matter what you perceive with your mind with it. So just getting into this authority is going to help you. And when we come into human design, we always tell people that the two most important things, the two things that you must remember that you have to practice with are the strategy and authority, right? And I can't tell you how many readings I've had with people that have had readings before. And I ask them, I say, hey, okay, well, before we begin, how is it going with your strategy and authority? And they look at me with a blank stare, right? So just remember these two things for sure. And, if I've done a session with you or if I haven't, and you go to talk with someone about human design, you at least need to know your strategy and authority in and out and experimenting with it. Otherwise, none of this information is going to help you at all. These are the centers. These are also where we understand and get the authorities. Now, authority is that mechanism, right? It's a mechanism. It is not a mental or a something you can like develop with your mind. And again, all the white stuff in our chart is what is competing with us against our authority, right? So we've kind of been introducing that. So you can see in your own chart where those things are coming in. And today we're going to be talking about those actual aspects of your authority. So you don't have to go with conditioning that's taking away from it. This information builds on itself, right? We're learning this whole language. We're learning how to read music, right? So all of that goes with it. There are 7 authorities, right? The mind is never an authority. The authority is the mechanism in the vehicle that we tune into. It is the other binary of consciousness that we tap into. And there is there's a hierarchy of authorities, meaning we can look at a person's chart and see, depending on what they have defined or colored in, what their authority is. We don't even have to have the program, the software tell us what their authority is. You could tell by, for example, if they have the solar plexus, anyone who has this defined is automatically emotional authority or solar plexus authority. So this would be at the top of the hierarchy, and it's not like better or worse. It's just this is what would dominate the chart if you have it. Doesn't matter about anything else in the chart. If you have this defined, it automatically makes you a solar plexus authority being. And like we talked about, the solar plexus is 50% of the world and it is operating over time to get the awareness, to get the perspective. Your authority is waiting over time to see what is revealed. All right, so the next authority on the hierarchy is the sacral. So if you look at your chart and you don't have the solar plexus colored in, but you have the sacral colored in, for one, you're automatically a generator. And for two, your sacral authority, right? So that is the next authority in line. Sacral authority, which is what I am, actually, is basically a mechanism in the vehicle that like turns on when something is correct. It's almost like a gut feeling, but it's really this like motor in the vehicle that it's like, yes, this feels correct. It's pretty much in the moment, right? Where solar plexus was waiting over time, not making decisions in the moment. Sacral is more so making decisions in the moment. And we talked about how the sacral has like the 3 responses where it's yes, definitely yes, hell yes. And then the which is like no. And then what we had talked about was that hesitation, the I'm not sure, right? So this is what you would need to start tuning into. You have to reawaken the sacral. The hesitation or the pausing energy, the neutral, it's kind of like a neutral energy. That is what you want to start practicing with saying no to. Because those are the times where we could probably say yes or get convinced or rationalize with our mind. And that's going to lead us to the wrong direction. So a lot of times too, you'll have the sacral and the solar plexus both colored in, which would be an emotional generator like Kim, right? So this is pretty common too. So Kim and people like this have that ability to feel that energy and information in the moment, right? It's not mental, it's like an energy. And then they also need to wait still, though. Okay. They need to wait until they have the clarity and the awareness over time. So we're going to be getting into the less common authorities. They're still very important, but they're, most of the world is solar plexus and sacral. Like that's the majority of the planet. So we've kind of covered a lot on that. But I want to get into these other authorities. So if you do not have the solar plexus defined or the sacral, but you have the spleen defined, then you're splenic authority. And for some of you that were in that class where we were talking about the spleen, you remember that we spoke about how it's instinct, it's in the now, it's awareness right now, only now. If you miss that awareness in the now, you miss it. So splenic defined people need to go with their first impressions, go with their gut, understand their lymphatic system, right? Because that's really what it is. Their fight or flight survival mode is indicating something to them, and it's coming through fear. It's that gut feeling that sometimes we ignore because we might think we're being paranoid, or this doesn't make any sense. Why would my body be telling me this? And this is what you really need to listen to. So with splenic authority, it's kind of at first, a little bit tricky because your body is telling you things that might seem very odd, very strange, that doesn't make any sense. And you want to start listening to that. I've kind of used the example before of like if you're driving and you normally go right, but for some reason you get this information to go left, just go left. And if you are splenic authority, you probably are experiencing things in your life where you've gone through events or experiences and you have this feeling like, I knew that was going to happen, but I didn't listen, right? I didn't listen to myself, didn't listen to my intuition, my instinct. And I wasn't, listening to that. So I just kind of went with it anyways. And then it showed me what happened, what I was going to experience. Pretty much every splenic person I talk to has
those experiences.
Yeah. And that's like the splenic authority is not that easy. Like there are things in charts that are like, okay, this isn't that easy to get in tune with, but once you are, it becomes automatic. And pretty soon your life is just like going and you're experiencing what you need to experience. But yeah, it comes through fear. And how many times are we told in different programs or spiritual philosophies and things like that to one, ignore your fear, or like, fear is something we shouldn't go into. It's bad, right? Why are you so afraid? Get over that. That's like really poor programming. Like that's really detrimental to everyone, actually. And then also how many people and programs are there that exist that are like, just follow your gut, just follow your intuition, which is also really not good for emotional authority.
Right.
So we're seeing like, okay, some people need to like really wait and get that awareness over time. And then some people need to make a decision in the now, right now. So if you're splenic authority and you don't have solar plexus or the sacral as your design, you need to listen to what's coming in right now and follow that. And yeah, don't try to talk it out with people. People might think what you're doing is weird. Like, why are you just leaving? Or why this is such a good situation? Why aren't you staying? Right. Yeah, so that's something that's important with that.
What about having all three? Like, so as a generator, sacral is, I mean, it's all sacral authority, but then you wait for the emotion. What if you
Yeah,
have the emotion and the spleen? I mean, you get, it
yeah,
tags you as emotional,
yeah.
but how does the defined spleen play into that if there's all three?
That's a really good question because that is something that happens a lot. So we always have to remember the hierarchy of authorities, right? So even if you have all three,
Mhm.
you're still solar plexus authority. And in the moment, you're feeling that, right, with the sacral. And then the spleen is also indicating some sort of intuition or clarity to you, but you don't want to take the action. And remember, this is all about decisions, right? So that is what this stuff is for, is just for decisions.
I'm wondering if it's a combination like of that, and then having the spleen, the yeah, and then, but waiting through the wave
Yeah.
and that way coming back. Okay.
Yeah. And that's exactly how it work. And like, if we think about it based on frequency, because sometimes I think of the centers as like these astral organs, right? There are these sensory perception things that can receive sensory, right? So the spleen would actually be first. So it goes, and it's like, oh, I feel something in the sacral, like, and
That's
then, oh,
spontaneous, right? That
yep, yep, yeah, and then the solar plexus over time would be like, oh, okay, yeah,
oh,
that
here it is.
intuition was correct, or no, it wasn't really correct in the
Almost
moment.
like a triple check.
Yeah, yep. So
Interesting.
yeah, it is interesting. And, if you have all three, you might be like really trying to go with your intuition and clarity if you didn't know about this stuff. Um, but the way I kind of think about it with the solar plexus authority and with being a generator in general is that it's so much energy to harness, right? It's like about pulling back and building that energy and then um,
Getting
really
the
kind of,
clarity.
yeah,
Like you pulling everything out of the way to get the clear before letting go. I'm also wondering if it's like why my decision making, it is a process to make decisions. It's something that I get ridiculed about, which is their problem. But
yeah,
like if I want to, when I was thinking of getting rid of the exercise equipment, I needed to get a feel for the room.
right.
Like I couldn't imagine, I couldn't head it, it wasn't good on paper. I had to like actually feel into it, what it would feel like, remove it, release it, and then decide. So just putting that out there for those who beat themselves up about taking a long time to make decisions, that you can kind of let yourself off the hook if this is the case.
Ego authority. This little heart, right? Ego is a power center and it is here to help humanity. The word ego triggers a lot of people, but I think we should do a whole class just on the ego
There you
eventually.
go.
But yeah, it's a power center. And the interesting thing about the mechanism of the ego, because that's what it is, it's a mechanism, is that it's not aware. So anybody who has this even defined is not even aware of how this is showing up. It's not self-aware. But it's an energy and it's a power center. There's not like a whole lot of well, if you look at it, there's really only two ways that it could be defined, right? We have the heart going straight to the throat, which would be a manifester. And we have the heart going straight to the G center, which, if nothing else was defined, or just for ease sake, that could be a projector, but it could also be something else. Don't, but it would not be a generator, right? Unless the sacral is defined. So, because if we think about it, that if the heart connects over here, oh, well, then that would make that defined. Then their solar plexus, no longer ego authority. Or if it connects over here, okay, now there's splenic authority. So there's really only two channels that could be defined. This is the 2145 and the 2551. And these would be heart or ego authority. Now, ego authority is very interesting because it's not self-aware. The ego's job is to, use its energy and its power to accumulate things, to be in control of things, to be the first of something, which is like competitiveness, or to be the one that is the best at something, or to be the one that delivers, the one that's like, I'm gonna build the ark or the community or the church, right? This is actually where the ego comes from, and there's a healthy expression, unhealthy expression. But if it's ego authority and that's all you have is your authority, then you want to ask yourself when you're making a decision, what am I going to get out of this? What's in it for me? Now, most people in society, we don't like that energy, right? If we're working with someone and they're putting off that energy, it's kind of like, this kind of thing. But it's important for ego authority to keep that in mind and to do that when making their decisions. Well, what's in it for me? And then you look at your channels and you see, based on what you have, how that operates. Yeah, I mean, basically, it's like the willpower is the authority in a sense, right? Because the ego is the willpower. So really, it's whatever your they say, like, whatever your I says, like, I am going to do this, right? That's willing yourself to do something. And yeah, I mean, you need to ask like yourself, what do I want and what's in it for me? And either you're going to have the willpower to do it or not, and that's going to be your authority. If you have the 2145, which I don't, maybe people on the replay will have this. This is one of the most difficult channels to have in a chart because it's meant to operate like these gates are meant to operate separately, meaning one person's supposed to have one and then another person comes in and has the other part to make the channel. But if you have the full channel in your chart, which would make you either a manifesting generator or a manifester, and if that's all you have, then you're ego authority. That is something that it's healthy for you to be selfish, and then just remember to be inclusive of others. If you are ego defined, that is something that's very important. Be inclusive, and you have to ask yourself, but what do I want? It's okay to be selfish. And do I have the willpower to do this, right? So if you have the ego connected to the solar plexus, for example, which I know some people in the group have that, then your emotional authority is also connected to this ego energy, right? Which is, okay, emotional authority is going to give you clarity over time as to whether or not you have the willpower to deliver, the willpower to build what is being demanded and asked of you. So we're going to start to see how, yes, we're talking about the authorities in like a vague way, but as you get more into and you start to see, oh, well, what channel is connecting that? What gates are connecting that? What is the essence? What is the refined or the differentiated way that this authority is coming out? And that's 35% of the world has a defined ego, but not, I don't remember the percent for just ego authority. I think it's pretty low. But okay, so the next thing, if you don't have the solar plexus or the sacral or the spleen or the ego defined, but you have the G center defined, then that is going to be part of your authority. This is what self-projected authority is. And that is something that we talk about, is self-projected authority. Self-projected is going to be a projector. And the self-projected authority is the G center, which is the center of self, identity, love, direction, connected to the throat. So their throat is something that they need to listen to. Their identity. This is actually a pretty rare authority. And this is an authority that, just like no inner authority or reflectors, right? Because now we're getting into these very rare, unusual authorities. right? Which is like nothing defined below below the belt, right?
Right.
Which is a gift, right? It's huge wisdom and everything. It's not a disadvantage, but if you don't know about this, you're trying to be indecisive or you're trying to emotionally decide, not going to work. So the G center connected to the throat is the identity coming out of the throat, the sense of direction coming out of that fixed mechanism of the throat. And it only comes out of the throat when it's recognized because it's a projector, right? So this self-authority is something that you need to take over time. You cannot just listen to yourself and then out and decide right away. We call it soundboarding. Okay, soundboarding is where projectors in particular, but no authority people, self-projected, even reflectors can kind of do this too, but it's more so for projectors. Soundboarding is where they need to hear themselves speak, right? You need to hear yourself, what is coming out of you. Okay. As an example, I have a really good friend who's self-projected, and one day he contacted me and was like, "Hey, I'm struggling to figure out what to do with this decision that he had." And so I just got on the phone with him. I knew he needed to soundboard, right? So I'm not going to try to tell him what to decide. I'm asking him questions to pull out his answers, right? What's coming out of him, and just asking him, well, okay, well, what do you think you should do? Okay, and what about this? And what about that? So I'm just asking questions. So if you're self-projected, you need 3 people or more that you can go to and soundboard. You need to make it clear to them that you don't need them to fix your problem, right? Or make it better for you, because again, this is about you being in your own authority. And you want to see what comes out of your throat with that person. I have a couple of notes here I want to say. So whatever comes out of your mouth is only of value if it's not mind directed. So we have been talking about how all of this stuff is about getting out of your mind, right? And being in your frequency. So even communication is not meant to be mind directed, right? So even when I'm doing this stuff, it's like, and everyone, we always are sharing things with people, right? We're not trying to like figure everything out and then speak, right? So especially with self-projected, if it's something that's very mentalized and rationalized and, oh, I've been thinking about this for
Mm.
days, it is the spontaneous verbal transmission that comes out of you that you can feel your truth and your frequency. And you need to wait. You need to do this with several different people and get into that, like channeling energy and noticing how your throat mechanism, if you're a self-projected projector, is like a compass, and it's guiding you, and it's through that frequency and through that truth. And you have to let your like spontaneous voice flow. Sometimes we call this like the blah blahs. um,
That's if it's the throat is defined or not.
that's if you're self-projected authority. But if in general though, also, um, we are all meant to just let our throat spontaneously operate, because that is actually how we access the truth in the frequency. So sometimes when we hear people speak, we're like, wow, that's really profound, or I'm inspired by them, or whatever it is. We all actually have that ability in our uniqueness. Um, and it's about in that spontaneous flow. Um, so yeah, you have to train your mind to measure things if you're a self-projected authority, but not judge things, because if we start involving the mind in this decision, whatever it is, when it comes to judging something, rather than just taking it for what it is, right? If it's judging something or valuing it, or being emotional about it, right? Then you're not in the right direction. Self-projected people are people that also provide direction to others just by existing, right? And that's really an amazing thing. Like, I love this when, like, what I've been experiencing over the last 8 years of doing human design and looking at every single person's chart that I know, and just seeing patterns, and just, wow, this is how this works. I love it because so much is that just our coach, just our being is like affecting other people and like their trajectories just because we met, right? It's like, oh, we are crossing our fractal lines and like impacting both of our directions. And that's really fascinating to me. I can tell like when someone comes into my house and like I know they're cross or something. It's really fascinating when you get down to that level. So the reason that self-projected people provide direction is because there are these 3 channels that come up from the G center to the throat. And these channels are about providing direction, right? So even if you have one of those channels, but you're not a self-projected authority, like you might have another authority, there's probably an aspect of you that is also providing direction, and it is projected, like projectors, right? Waiting for the invitation, needing to be recognized. You can't just go to somebody and just start giving them direction. That's what leads to bitterness and people not appreciating you. We'll get more into channels and stuff like that later. So let's say that you're a splenic authority and you have a problem with somebody and you want to talk to them and you're like looking at the problem with your mind, you're measuring, you're researching, you're getting the essence of what the problem is or not. And then it's like your gift, right? You're asking yourself, like, what is the core issue? What is the problem? What's bothering you? And then don't do anything with whatever you're researching. Like, don't judge it. Again, so much of this, what we're realizing is that nothing is personal. It is mechanical. However, we do need to communicate. We do need to set boundaries. We need to establish needs and things like that. But basically, just wait. If you have a problem, if you're self-projected, just wait. Don't initiate going to that person and talking to them about it. Wait until the person recognizes that there's a problem. And then they ask you. They say, hey, what's wrong? And then you're going to access what comes out of your throat, right? And you're going to be able to speak it. And you're going to see that all that research you were doing with the mind, all that, evaluating, when you speak about it, it's probably going to come out totally different. Okay. So that's kind of interesting to think about. And this goes to for people that have an undefined mind, meaning undefined head, undefined ajna. One of the greatest dilemmas of this, which I have this, right? Kim, you have this too. It's like a lot of people do. It's open-minded, it's intelligence, those kind of things. But it's accepting and realizing that we are not able to say the things that we want to say in the way that we want them to come out sometimes. So it can be like fear of embarrassment of, well, if I speak a certain way or if it comes out a certain way, then I'm going to be embarrassed. And I don't know, it's just really about letting that go and recognizing that you can access that unique throat mechanism without having to think about everything. So
it's just a trust the letting it come through for whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then not judging self.
Yes, exactly. And not trying to guide necessarily what's coming out of your throat. We can do like a whole, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but there's so many mechanisms that are like, we're designed to do that, right? And we're built to do that. All those pressures we've talked about with the root and the head and all the mechanisms, like we can operate like perfectly with that. So, all right, last point here on the self-authority is you have to hear yourself, right? That is what you want to take away from this. You need to hear yourself with many different people. And that way, you know what's right or wrong for you, what's correct. Listening to your throat without guiding it. And your real truth doesn't come out if you're using your mind. Okay. All right. The next one is no inner authority. So no inner authority is pretty unique. There's a couple configurations for this. So it's only from the neck up, right? The throat, the ajna, or the head center. If you have a combination of those and nothing else below it, then you're a projector with no inner authority. So some people can just have the throat and the ajna, and then some people can have all three, which I believe some people call like a lighthouse projector, right? It's just these three. It's like a lighthouse. It's all that energy and information, right? So if you think of someone that's totally open, but they just have the top, right? They have a throat mechanism and the mind defined, and that's what they have that's consistent, their mind and their throat. And so it's probably like they're very fixed potentially in certain ways, and very wise. And they're here to develop things mentally, right? They're here to discover mental truths. So no inner authority. And this is why I was saying too, they needed to listen to the center's call. This is probably at that point where this is going to be why.
But back to it though, it's in the library, so they could. It probably helped to learn it by going back and forth anyway, to hear it a few times.
Sure. Yep. So if you think about it, if you only had these three defined, or a combination of that, either those two or all three, or just the top, the G center is open. Okay. So the G center is direction and location. And we've talked about how if your G center is open and it's undefined, it's a white area, then location is probably your number one thing that you should have correct. Like, absolutely. If you don't feel comfortable in your location, then nothing else in your life is going to be in alignment, no matter what you do. So that is how important that is. Now, especially for these people that have no inner authority, I mean, they don't have a mechanism that other people have that they can rely on within their body, right? So this is kind of interesting. It's very different, right? So again, we talked about the soundboarding. This is also where soundboarding is going to be important, and waiting the lunar cycle. So no inner authority is really about that waiting. We can actually lump together. I'm going to touch a little bit on reflectors in this too, because technically reflectors don't have an inner authority, right? They're lunar authority, moon authority. But then there are projectors that have a defined mind that have this. So you need lots of time to make decisions. The more time, the better. Reflectors, you have to wait a lunar cycle, and then projectors, opportunities that are coming to you have to come through being recognized for your mind, right? So if you remember when we talked about being projectors in that class, it's all about recognition. So if you are a no inner authority projector, but you're being recognized for your ability to work, this is not correct, right? There's incorrect recognition and correct. So if you're no inner authority, the recognition of your mental and your mind and your articulation and your speaking, all of that needs to be recognized depending on the channels that you have. And then again, we've talked about this before, but the most difficult thing for us as humans is to accept that our mind cannot lead our life, right? So especially for these people, it's probably extra difficult, right? In the beginning. And this is because the mental plane, we can't let it control our life, because we can rationalize everything, talk ourselves into any decision, think about the past, think about the future, come up with every possibility. So it doesn't really work. So there's no place to go within yourself if you are no inner authority to give yourself a secure yes or no. So you're kind of just trying to figure things out, and it can feel like you develop these strategies of trying to be certain with your decisions by, I'm decisive, I'm not in fear, or how do I feel, right? So they try to do these other ways that don't work for them. The only thing you can do is also have people around you, right, that have different authorities. Because, for example, let's say that we're in a business. You can't wait a month, right? You can't wait the time that you need to wait. For reflectors and projectors, location is that most important thing. Location means the right place, which is like geometry. And then what that means is that you're around the right people. That's why the place is so important. Because if you're around the right people, then they're authorities. You can actually kind of like use their authorities. Now,
Borrow them. Hello. I need to borrow pieces of you.
yep. And I kind of am like a little, trepidatious in saying that, because I'm like, well, I don't want people to take that as like so literally, but sometimes you need to be able to trust the other person if you're working with them. Like, all right, your splenic projector friend that you're working with, if
Yeah.
you're a reflector and they're like, no, we got to do this now. Hopefully you can trust them and let their decision make it. Main things, just never be spontaneous, never make mental decisions, practice the soundboarding, have a couple people in your life that you can go to. When you call them up, you say, hey, do you mind if I just like bounce some ideas off of you? And, encourage them to ask you questions, and that they don't need to figure it out. They don't need to be biased or like there's no problem or whatever it is. I would also suggest having like a journal and like a calendar, so you can write down like, okay, today's the 5th and I got invited to do this. I'm a projector and they're offering me this and I need to wait until this amount of time, like mark it on the calendar. And then of course, right, knowing how open you are means that so many other people are affecting you, right? If you're here to be a guide, right, you're here to be someone that is very, very wise about other people. And that's like part of your gift with this. Recognizing that the conditioning, all the stuff we've been talking about with conditioning, in those specific areas, and then recognizing if those things are healthy. Everyone is always being conditioned. We cannot get rid of it. And it's okay, but especially if you're a projector, you better like the conditioning because it's like, this is going to keep happening and it better be healthy for you. Because that's kind of how projectors work. It's like they get enveloped, right? The generator aura takes in and the projector's penetrating in while they're being enveloped, right? They're being taken in and they're penetrating. They're absorbing and penetrating. So if you're no authority and you're not a reflector, that's what you're doing. So you're being taken in, and all that person's energy, their whole chart, all their gates and channels and everything are just swirling around in you. You're experiencing that. And you want to get awakened to that, because then that's how you're actually going to be able to guide them, right? If you know yourself very well and you feel that, and you can recognize all these energy shifts and information that's coming in, these different feelings that are not yours, then you can help guide them when recognized, right? Okay, so yeah, you need to get a full perspective of questions that you're being asked. So each person will be different when you soundboard. That's what we were talking about, the at least 3 people. As long as you are patient, you can see things more clearly than anyone else, for what is right for you and for others. Learning to trust your wisdom. Don't offer your wisdom for free. So I kind of think of like projectors sometimes as like was that movie, The Karate Kid, right? Where there's like the master, right? The wax on, wax off. I think that's what it is. And you're kind of like this like kung fu master, right? Where people come and they're designed to come to you. You have all these keys and wisdom and everything. And you do need to like deny some of them. Like some people cannot come into your aura, right? This is, even Ra talked about that, how he like was very protective of his aura. Like some people were not allowed to come near him. And it's not personal, it's mechanical, it's genetic, right? And we're afraid that people are going to think we're rude or this or that. But if you get really in tune with yourself and then you feel this energy coming in, your body's like, nope. Especially if you're splenic. This is like very, very important for splenic authority people. I've felt this before. I'm not splenic authority, but I have the spleen. And especially for projectors, like the sanctity of your aura, really protect it, and be that kung fu master that's like, okay, yes, you can come in, you've come to me, and with your authority, you think that they're going to take your information and use it, right? We don't want to be projectors that are giving information and knowledge and wisdom out, trying to get recognition and them not using it. Like that's that creates bitterness, right? And what's interesting is that even though, like, for example, Kim, you and I are generators, and a lot of people are generators, we have projected energies too. I have one projected channel. So there's parts of us it's the most common thing, the projected energy. So even if you're another type and you have a projected channel, which is highly common, then you still need to apply this understanding of like recognition, not just, giving your information out or giving your wisdom out, trying to get recognition for this. Okay. All right. So no inner authority, a couple other things. I know we've only got a couple minutes. Eating alone is great. Again, reflectors, like we've talked about in the types class, are completely open. All their centers are whites. They have no quote unquote definition with the centers, which is a huge gift, right? They're like the oracle, or I kind of think of them like a crystal ball, or the beings that are carrying all these keys that are walking around and they just plug into people and just, activate quantum possibilities, right? It's really amazing. So again, all the stuff we talked about with the no authority, that does apply to you, reflectors, and the lunar cycle, the lunar pattern, because the moon is moving through that wheel that I've shown you guys. It's going through all the gates, and the moon is transmitting, or really filtering, that neutrino ocean that we've talked about. Okay. And it's going through these codes. So as a reflector, it's clicking in and it's activating different things in you as it's moving around, right? So this is why your clarity comes over the whole month, right? Because 29 and a half days is the lunar cycle. And especially for you, you want to have the calendar and write down when things come in. Place is the most important for you. You're designed to be in the middle of the community, right? And it's from there that you can be that barometer, swirl all the energy and knowing around, wait the lunar cycle, and then be the person that activates these possibilities. Really brings in something that could not have existed unless you were there. Yeah. And then also there's some stuff with like reflectors need to have kids with their partners sometimes. And then they end up like kind of using their kids' authorities on a daily basis. That's like a whole nother conversation. But just like I was saying before with how self-projected and how certain projectors need to soundboard and have like trusted people around them. That's super important for reflectors. Have trusted advisors around you that can help bring clarity in a moment. But definitely major decisions for you in your life, you need to wait the lunar cycle and knowing your pattern. Tracking the moon. Like if I was a reflector, I would have a calendar that tracks the moon, and I would be checking that, and I would write down the like based on my own chart what it's activating, and that definition, what it's creating. Oh, today it's activating this, and I am experiencing as a generator today, because that's going to happen actually every month on that part of the cycle. You have a consistent cycle that repeats every month, and that's how you know who you are. You learn a pattern because it repeats every 12 times a year, and that's where it gets really interesting. But it can take a lot of there's a cognitive threshold to get there. I mean, you have to know a lot of information, and it's fascinating. But yeah, so at least have some people around you. Weigh your lunar cycle. The more time, the better. Don't be spontaneous ever. And then just really embracing that perspective of, okay, I am like this person that is a gauge for the energy of the moment, right? The location of the people, and watching how you're activating people, watching the surprise that you get, and then also the disappointment, right? These are the gauges. When we talked about the types and, in that class, and we were saying generators, right? It's either frustration or satisfaction. There's something called energy signature. The energy signature is when you're correct, this is your energy signature. So generators, it's satisfaction. And that's why we can look at frustration and go, oh, that's like the opposite. Okay, I need to go to my energy. Just be your energy signature. Follow that. That's literally like the most distilled way down you can live this stuff, right? Projectors, right? It's success in guiding others, successful relationships, success, and just distribution of resources, all that, or bitterness. Nobody wants to hear my advice. I can't guide anybody. Like, this is like, nobody gets me. Or success. What relationships are successful? Go that way. The correct recognition. Manifestors, it's peace, which is not being controlled, right? Not meeting resistance, or anger. Meeting resistance, feeling controlled. I can't move. And that's where we get all the dilemmas. It's like a feedback loop that is exponential, and it's just growing and growing. It's anger because it's being controlled and everyone's getting angry, you know? And then the reflectors, the surprise. Oh, wow, I didn't know this was going to happen. This is amazing. New possibilities. This is different. I feel something different. This is not like a homogenized situation. This person's not homogenized. They're in their truth, right? Reflectors are like, we call them kind of like the cops, right? Of who's like homogenized and who's being correct, right? So they get surprised when they're around a truth frequency. It's like, whoa. Or that disappointment, right? I'm not in the right place. I'm on my own. I can't make decisions. I feel lost. I'm disappointed. This isn't how I thought it was going to go. Right? So we just really, at the end of the day, embody your energy signature. That is literally the most simplest way to explain this stuff. And after many years of doing this and thousands of readings I've done and studying all this information, like literally that is like it's like the distilled little thing that came out.
The punchline. We like the punchline around here.
Yeah. So
the punchline is to be in that, like for the generator, it's to be in that satisfaction signature. Does this satisfy me? Is this satisfying? Does this feel like satisfaction?
Yeah.
And so for the reflector, it's what?
It's either surprise or disappointment.
So the surprise is just kind of like the surprise by what they're learning through themselves.
Yeah, just like, because remember, they're like the barometers. So they're like the canary. And so whatever, like, wow, this is like a new possibility. I didn't even know this was possible, right? It's like,
wow. Can you guys relate to this? What about the projector? What was the one for the projector?
Success or bitterness.
Yeah.
And it's really success with guiding, right? That's the thing. It's success. This is the whole thing with all this stuff too, guys. We are redefining terms. Success does not mean money, right? It does not mean whatever. So it's successful like relationships, success in being recognized and then being able to deliver your gifts as a projector, right? That is success. Can you deliver your wisdom, and is it being used? And is there like a healthy partnership with that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So good.
Yep. And then I guess I'll just say one more thing. The mind is the outer authority. So we've talked about outer authority. So as you're in your correct alignment, in your truth, in your frequency, then that's what we use the mind for, right? We use that translating box to not be mentally directed with our communication, but it puts pressure down, and then we are able to communicate our frequency and be an outer authority. So whenever we hear the word outer authority, it's somebody else's mind sharing their information and their truth and what they're experiencing, and everyone has a right to be an outer authority. But then we always have to check in with our authority to see if their outer authority is correct for us. And the science of existence is that we are moving and evolving to a new space and with our consciousness, right? So if we understand we're in this fractal machine that is churning out consciousness, we're all in these little vehicles that are extracting, and it's almost like it's pinging back, it's reporting back to the whole, right? Because we're everything. And each one of us are like different combinations of codes, right? So it's almost like the universe is experimenting. It's like, what happens with this combination? What about this one? What about this one? What about this one? Right. And so we're in these vehicles, and currently what we are developing or extracting out, what space is doing, right, is the ajna, right? That's the space of time that we're in, is the ajna. And we've been in this for a long time. So if we can conceptually understand that we're like building out a macro being, and I don't really like to say it like that because people could take that literally. But if we can kind of think about it like that, we are carving out a new location for consciousness, right? We're going into the depths, into the voids, into the areas that no one's ever gone. And that's what this kaleidoscope, the fractal, the machine is doing. It's pulling us into this new space, right? So we learned about the neutrino ocean, right? We are flying through an ocean of neutrinos. The neutrinos are the information. It's like our food, right? For consciousness that we're pulling up, we're using our gears, and we're in our truth, in our frequency, we're able to extract purity, right? This consciousness that we can give to the totality and to ourselves. So what is happening is the ocean where we're moving to right now, it's chaotic, right? It's really chaotic because before mutation, meaning our vehicles are going to change. We're going to be like a new species, actually. And this is going to sound crazy, but this is what's happening. And it happened in 1781 as well, a different thing. This is when we had the American Revolution. We discovered Uranus. But at that point of the ocean, we actually became like a new species. This is why the 7-centered chakra, the 7 chakra thing, and then now we're in like this 9-centered thing. It's actually a different vehicle. Okay. We came from the 7 chakra world. We're in new vehicles, but we're still in a 7 chakra ruled world. That's why all this stuff has to fall apart. So anyways, we're in this new time frame. We are the interregnum species between 1781 and 2027. We are a like a combination of both. Okay, because in 2027, there's going to be like this whole different type of vehicle. We're going to maybe look the same, but operating totally different. 1781, we look the same, but different. Okay, we're actually different consciousness, different world. Look at what has happened between 1781 and now. The rise in technology, the rise in everything that we have built in our world. In consciousness, we're at the last little space before 2027. We're like, when a tsunami kind of pulls out and all the water like goes out and it's going to come, right? So that's kind of where we're at. And we're at a 7-year period between now and 2027. And so when we look at the charts, we look at the way that it's set up, yes, it's very interesting to know about yourself, but to know about it shows us what's happening with humanity and our species. And trying to put this in a very simple way because I could get very complex here, but basically we are the ocean, right, that we've been in has been in a very certain particular, we'll call like the background noises, the ocean, right, that we're in for many thousands of years. Actually, it's called the cross of planning. It is what built our world. We have been in this world of organizing and big government and religions and hierarchies and community and holding us together and food systems, all these things that we've been building up to. And because of that, it has given us the space to figure out life mentally. That is the time period that we're in, is we are needing to come to terms with why we exist, right? So this is the area of the global galactic, right? It's actually the whole macro mechanism is churning us out to okay, why do we exist mentally? That's like what's happening. That's what we're trying to figure out. And that's actually why we have this information, right? Is to come to terms mentally, the mental plane. And we're in that last 7-year period, and we're moving to a new ocean, right? The waves are going to crash. The mutation happens. There's always chaos before mutation, right? So before we have something new, it's like everything's like, and then it's like, boop, and then we pop in. The mutation is already happening. Like we're already experiencing it. This is why we have autism and so much rise in colon cancer. And actually, in the future, they say that the reproductive rates and the population, like the reproductive rates, are going to go way down.
Right, I've heard that.
Yep. So this is not something to fear.
Yeah,
Okay.
she's saying my husband's stress comes from fear of the future. Someone like Bill Gates is going to turn us into robots, is what she's saying. I'm not sure how to respond to this. So what you're saying makes sense, but it doesn't have to be fearful. Not at all. It's just what's happening,
Mhm.
and you're learning how to be.
Yep.
We are being. It is happening,
Yes.
and it's not personal.
Yep.
And it's that. And also, like, could we speak to that more coming into wholeness as individuals, like, and then a whole as humanity? Because
Yeah.
that's like, we're kind of, I don't want to say doing away with anything, but this to become one, like you've got to do this and then you become one, it-
Mhm.
we have to become responsible individuals. We become whole.
Yep.
We become healthy. We are the ones who are in charge of our own emotions, our opening our own hearts, being willing to love again, having compassion and grace. And like, we have to do that individually. We can't expect a system or a person to do that for us.
No.
And that together, if each, like we were talking the other day when I asked you the question about like the fight for humanity, and it's like humans have evolved, humans are involved. It's humanity that hasn't come together
Yes.
as
Well,
a
and
whole.
that's actually what's shifting, is that we are not going to be together. Like, this is not where we're going. The ocean is going to individuality. Um, it's going to like an individual plane, meaning that we have this 7-year period. We are these, this current species, these current consciousnesses that have incarnated in these vehicles. We are in this time frame of being at the closing of the door of individual consciousness, because the species after us are going to be more of like a collective consciousness, but not in the way that most people think. It's kind of like Sense8, if you've ever seen that show, in a way where it's going to be 3 to 5 people together, and then they're having their own unique consciousness together. I don't want to get too much into that, but
Like units of being,
yeah,
kind of
it's
using or
gonna,
extracting from each other in order to create wholeness.
yeah, we're not going to be able to communicate with them. They're going to appear as like incapable humans, like just not functioning. And like I said, this is why we have like the rise in autism, but it's going to be like that, but times like a lot more. So I think what's happening is that we are realizing our infinity, right? Our infinite nature. And that's not just a woo-woo cliche thing. But that's, I believe, where we're heading with consciousness, and that and that is the whole thing too. You don't really ever die. I've gone in a lot into like the whole death series, and these are the things that fascinate me, right? It's like, what is actually happening? What are we doing? And um, you know, only thing I have in my will, right, is don't touch my body for 72 hours, because I know the mechanisms of how this stuff works and how like my consciousness will continue, right? So this is not about we're going to try to stop what's happening. The only way to actually survive and to navigate this next phase that we're going into is strategy and authority. Like, that is it. So if we're doing things out of fear, right, we're going into prepper mode, okay, fine, do that if you want, but do strategy and authority, right? So if you do that, you're going to be able to survive no matter what comes at you or what is correct for you. It'll come. Even as we hit this tsunami, this tidal wave, we are the species, us, all of us, are the ones that are like doulas for this next species. And really, we are probably going to be some of the only people that are going to be able to communicate or know what's going on with these children, because as they come into the world, they're not gonna know what to do with them. They're probably gonna end up killing a lot of them, and they're gonna put them in institutions because they don't know what to do. It's like all these people are having babies that have massive problems, right? That like they can't feed themselves, they can't talk, they can't function. And then what's going to happen is they're going to be in these institutions, and then all of a sudden the right combinations are going to be next to each other, and they're going to have their own unique experiences. We're moving through a space, and it is serious.
You're saying the predictions of, because of the transmuting and the way that it's changing and coming in order to make the next switch, like that's part of
The
an
big
interface.
organizations, the big systems of the world that support our world are not going to be here in that next time frame. So follow your strategy and authority, right? A lot of people, we don't talk about this that much unless people are fluent in these languages, because they can go into fear mode. They'll just freak them out, right? Strategy and authority, you have 7 years. And again, this whole thing, this mechanism, this machine that we're in, is to churn out our consciousness, right? So we think that it's important to, do this or that in our life, and really it's not. It's like the whole thing is you being in your truth frequency, you being in your consciousness, and that is the only reason you're here.
It's like the head part, the mental part, this makes so much sense. And then what's the word, rationalize, deny, ignore, put aside, whatever, like not wanting that to be true. And then the body starts falling apart.
Yeah. Yep. And that's the thing is too, like when we even understand how relationships come together, what love is. Like I'm finishing up a lot of the like love and sex courses and relationship courses right now. And just I wanted to get more fluent in it too. But when we understand like how genetics works, like they have genetics, all these codes have poles, and we are actually like attraction is a genetic thing, and we are attracted to what we're not. So we're attracted to the white stuff, right? We're attracted to, okay, Kim, you're open in your head and he's got a defined head. He's open in his emotional system and you're open and you're defined, right? So this is what we see.
Open to it and resisting it is,
well, it's genetic. It's not, you're mixing mental with, I get what you're saying. Yes. And his mind, it's a love hate. So this is what happens. We're attracted because really the whole mechanism of genetics is survival of the species. Make more, make more, make more, make more. That's it. So, and we have to make more to create genetic diversity. So we can't marry the same. We can't have babies with the same genetics, right? I find that stuff fascinating too. Just genetics with relationships. You can see it. It's like, of course, I see why you guys were attracted to each other, what the problem is, like, and then it's from there though that you can have an awakened relationship, but most people are in relationships that are just really not correct, like at all. And that's the other thing. If you enter your relationship correctly, then you're at least off to a good start, and you have a chance. And then the purpose of relationships, other than making more, which is the genetic physiological purpose, that's why we are genetically attracted to each other, is to make babies. And then the other part of it is the consciousness, right? Consciousness is bouncing off that conditioning, that information, because conditioning is connection, chemistry, right? We can see where there's connection and chemistry. And then it's taking that information and, that can either be suffering or it can be awakening, right? But ultimately, if it's not healthy, it can kill you. It can really damage your body. Like,
I'm not afraid to say that's why we have so much sickness and illness in the world.
Oh, totally.
So many people living completely out of alignment because of the rules, because of the family's conditioning or whatever, whatever they were told. I was talking to one of my clients yesterday about this and, trying to fit into the mold in religion and doing everything. And it's just like constant traps.
Right.
And then, even all the way into the marriage part. And then like, it's like, anyway, I don't want to go too much into that, but there's so many people sickly stuck in what religion told them and has got them by fear and guilt and worry and like not living life.
Definitely.
Living this dogma that is not serving.
Yeah. And that's why anything that gives you an outer authority, it's automatically not correct. Right. And that's why with this system, it's like, okay, here's how to be yourself, your authority. Here's how to tap into your mechanics, and then you discover it from there. Like, okay, is this correct for me? What is my body telling me?